Welcome to the Relaunch Your Career podcast. I am your host, Leah Lambert, career and interview coach and founder of Relaunch Me, where we help you find the work that you were meant to do. Welcome to the Relaunch Your Career podcast. Today, I have invited Dr Natalie Sheard, who is a lawyer and McKenzie Postdoctoral Fellow at the University of Melbourne, with expertise in discrimination by AI systems, particularly those used in employment. Natalie's research investigates how, when, and where this discrimination occurs, its impacts, and the adequacy of existing Australian and international legal responses. Natalie has been published widely in a range of domestic and international journals, as well as in the media on topics including algorithm-facilitated discrimination, emotion recognition technologies, and AI regulation. She has won academic awards and scholarships, including the prestigious Nancy Millis Medal, awarded by Trobe Uni for doctoral thesis of exceptional merit. Well done, Natalie, and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Leah. Thank you for that warm welcome. It's great to be here.
Natalie, as you know, a lot of our audience are mature job seekers, and so I think this topic is very interesting to a lot of the people out there who are possibly listening to this podcast. Can you first of all start by explaining your career history in a little bit more detail and how you first came to be interested in researching discrimination by AI systems?
Yeah, so I guess I came to researching AI systems and discrimination by those systems kind of later in my career as well. So I started out as a lawyer, a litigation lawyer. I did that for many years. I then moved into a kind of project-based role at the firm I was working in, leading innovation in the firm. So we were trying to design products and services to increase access to justice. I started to read about AI. So this is many years ago, like 8 years ago, 10 years ago. Started to read about AI, got concerned about the risks of discrimination. I'd always loved research and always wanted to do a PhD. So yeah, I decided to start one.
You recently wrote a research paper on discrimination by AI throughout the recruitment process. Can you first explain how you went about undertaking this research and who you spoke to?
So for that research, I looked at predictive AI systems that we used in recruitment to screen and shortlist job applicants. So I looked at 3 systems. I looked at CV screening systems, so systems that use keywords or profiles to sort and filter job applications. I looked at candidate assessment systems, so systems that assess behaviour or personality or particular skills. That might be in the form of a questionnaire or some kind of gamified assessment or a psychometric test. And I also had a look at video interviewing systems where applicants record themselves answering interviewing questions and then AI evaluates those answers. And I wanted to really understand how these systems were working in practice, and I knew I couldn't go to vendors to ask them how these systems work because it's all confidential, trade secrets. I couldn't go to job seekers because, they don't have any insight into the operation of these systems. So I decided that I needed to speak to employers to understand how they were operationalising and using these systems in practice. So that's what I did. I interviewed talent acquisition and HR professionals primarily, but I also did speak to some career coaches, AI vendors, and AI experts as well. I also had a look at some of the white papers for prominent vendors or 2 prominent vendors in the Australian market, HireVue and Sapia.
Interesting. And so from that research, what would you say were your key findings?
Well, my key finding was that there are serious risks of discrimination when these systems are used by employers, and that is discrimination against people who are already disadvantaged in the labour market, so people with disability, older applicants, applicants who speak English as a second language, women, etc.
Can we dive into that in a little bit more detail? So let's start with older applicants. A lot of our clients are probably would consider them more mature candidates. Can you explain how these algorithms might prevent an older candidate's resume getting through to, I guess, a recruiter's eyes?
Well, I mean, I didn't just look at resume screening systems. I guess, to even use these tools at the outset, you need a certain level of, digital literacy to be able to do a gamified assessment or to, even complete a video interviewing. I heard of older applicants who are really taken aback when they had to do a video interviewing. They struggled to, provide an answer within the time frame that they were required to. But it can even be a bit more sinister. I don't really want to use that. It can be a bit more deliberate, the discrimination that occurred. There was a case in the US where what the employer did is they configured their system to screen out women over 60 years of age and men over 55 years of age. So that was kind of intentional, explicit discrimination there.
And was that based on algorithms that were screening the resume, or also other parts of the process?
That was how they built their system. So yes, it was at that initial stage. It just initially screened out those people. So they didn't even get to, have their CV assessed, I guess. They were just automatically filtered out.
Okay. And so I imagine that would be algorithms that would be looking at their birth date, if it was on the resume, tenure in the workforce. Are those some of the sort of algorithms that they would be setting up in the system for that process?
Yeah. So look, we don't have any insight into how these systems are set up. Every employer has a different system. Even if they have a similar system to another employer, they kind of customize it and configure it in unique ways. It's in how they deploy it within the recruitment process or incorporate it within the recruitment process is different as well. So it is quite hard to know what it is that's happening in a particular process. There are no laws that require any transparency around these systems, so I think that makes it really hard. The other thing I found in my research of relevance is that systems or platforms like LinkedIn, they have a whole lot of filters that can be applied to people who've applied for jobs, and those include years of experience, year of graduation, experience, schools attended, geographic location. So particularly for things like year of graduation or year of experience, you can see how, applying those filters would discriminate against older applicants.
Yeah.
And that's something that employers can do on the back end without job applicants ever knowing that it's being done.
Exactly. Let's talk about the video interviewing. I think this is a really interesting one. I totally agree. There's a lot of people out there who technology just doesn't come as naturally to them. So I think, it's a really challenging process for them. I think it's also a really challenging process for someone who's an introvert. It doesn't matter what age they are, because, often introverts
Totally.
like to reflect and consider before responding. And when you've got to respond and answer a question in 2 minutes, it's just not something that a lot of people would find as a natural thing to do. Any thoughts on that, or any, from your research?
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I've definitely heard that anecdotally from job applicants that, these systems, having to do a video interview does make some people very stressful. People spend hours doing things like making sure that they look good, making sure they're smiling, but, the AI system probably isn't even assessing that in the first place.
From your research, Natalie, with these video interviews, would you say that 100% of companies are using AI to actually watch these videos and assess them against keywords and key criteria? Or do you think, that some people are still watching, they have a recruiter that's actually watching these? I imagine for high volume programs, it's probably more the AI doing it. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so just in terms of stats, it's around 24% of Australian organisations that are using some kind of AI system to screen and shortlist applicants. So that might be wholly or partially automating that process. So, it's not every employer, definitely, who are using these systems. In my research, I found that particular employers were more likely to use these systems. So for entry-level positions, so, a job in retail chains or perhaps in hospitality, graduate level jobs seem to employ these AI systems, or any kind of high volume role, first responder roles, applying for the police, ambulance, those kind of roles, are
Yeah.
more likely to have some kind of AI system.
I mean, if they're getting
And
7,000 applicants in a week, there's absolutely no way they've got the manpower or the female power to have someone actually watching all those videos. It's just near impossible.
yes, it would be very hard to do that. But again, you don't know for sure how, what is happening, because there's no requirements of transparency around that process. The way most videos work, I think, or what I found in my research, is that, the AI isn't even assessing like the actual video component. What happens is a transcript is made from the audio of your video, and then that is what is assessed by AI.
Yeah, interesting. So it's
Yeah.
it's keywords.
It's not even, yes, it's keywords, but it uses the same technologies as something like ChatGPT. So it's these large language models
Mm,
that are used to analyze your speech,
mm.
essentially. So, there's a risk of discrimination. If you speak English as a second language, for example, it's likely that the system isn't going to accurately transcribe your words, because it's well known that large language models perform poorly for people who don't speak standard English. If you differ from the norm in any way, because that's what these systems do, they are modelled around the norm or the most usual pattern in the data. So if you fall outside that, it's likely that you might receive a low score and be filtered out of the system.
Interesting.
So, yeah, I was going to say, so if you've had a break in your career and it's a CV screening system, maybe that you'll end up being screened out. If you didn't go to the right school or university, or you don't speak the right way, you could be screened out.
Yeah, so definitely some discrimination happening there for a number of people who are not, I guess, your traditional candidates or don't have linear careers that are.
Mm.
Can we just go back to that stat about 24% of companies? I would have thought, the larger companies, government departments, universities, it would almost be
Yes.
100%. I assume that's including like small business as well. Can you tell me a little bit more about where that stat came from?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that you question that, because I really questioned it as well. Like, to me, that just does not feel high enough. When I speak to people, when I speak to students, they say just about every single job that they go for, they have to go through some kind of AI-based assessment. I know my daughter was applying for entry-level roles, and it was just about every single job she was applying for. She'd either have to do a chat-based interview or do a video interview. So, yeah, I question that as well. That figure is based on a bit of research that was done by the Australian Human Resources Institute and the University of Queensland. And I think they did a survey of, I'd have to look it up, but it was a couple of hundred organisations. But it's not clear, whether they were smaller or larger organisations. There's another stat that there's another bit of research that was done by the Responsible AI Index in Australia, and that said that 62% of Australian organisations were using AI in recruitment extensively or moderately in 2024. But I think that's across the whole hiring funnel.
Mm,
So that would include things like scheduling interviews or helping write job applications. But I think you're definitely right. I feel like that stat is not reliable. It's too low. And, it is more common for AI to be used.
hmm. Interesting. What would you say surprised you most from the research, Natalie?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. I guess what I got surprised about was just the role that the vendors of these systems are now playing in recruitment processes. And I talk in my research about them becoming intermediaries really now in the labour market because, employers don't know how their systems work. They're deploying systems that they don't understand. They're complicated systems, they're opaque. So, for example, if a job seeker who's been rejected for a position wants to go back to the employer and say, why was I rejected? An employer can't answer that question. It's necessary, they then have to go back to the vendor to try and work out why did that happen? Sometimes job applicants will ask for an adjustment to the process because sometimes these systems aren't accessible, say, to people with disability. And again, employers then go to direct that person onto the vendor to make that adjustment. So I think vendors are starting to, occupy a really interesting place in the labour market.
Interesting. I had a client once years ago whose resume, like he'd been told by recruiters his resume was getting rejected. And I looked into it further, and what was actually happening is that his surname, I won't say what it was, but it was the same as
Mhm.
the name of a field in the resume field. And so what was happening is that it was getting confused and it was just screening him out of the process and not picking up his surname. And I was just so baffled because it was the same template that we use for hundreds and hundreds of people. And we've never had that as a problem before. But it was just his particular surname was getting confused with one of the names. It was just, really interesting. So I went to the vendor and let them know because it was obviously some sort of bug in their system.
Oh my God, that kind of horrifies me because that person was lucky they had you there investigating that for them, but more disadvantaged candidates in the labour market won't have that. Like, how do they bottom out what's happening? And if it is just a technical problem like this that's kind of locking them out of employment, that's pretty concerning to me. I mean,
Yeah.
I have read about other systems where you have to fill out in the application, you have to fill out certain fields. And if you are over a certain age, it won't let you select that date. So you actually can't submit an application at all because, it won't accept your application if you're older, for example. And then what kind of recourse do you have? Like, can you go to the employer? Like, it's very hard, I think, to contest that kind of exclusion.
From your research, Natalie, what do you believe needs to change to make it a fair playing field for all applicants?
Yes, interesting. I think a lot of things need to change. I'm a lawyer, so I'll focus on legal things. I think really there needs to be a legal duty on employers to make sure that the systems they deploy don't discriminate against people in the labour market. So I think that would require them to take certain steps before they deploy a system. So, for example, I think that systems should be audited, you know. There should be some kind of independent expert who looks at the system before it's put into place to kind of stress test it to see if there is a risk of discrimination before it's put on the market. I also think that transparency for job seekers really needs to be improved. When you're applying for a job, you need to understand what the process is. You need to understand if you'll be assessed by AI, how you'll be assessed by AI, on what basis. Yeah, I think that's kind of basic fairness.
Yeah.
So I think for employers, it's hard because you alluded before to the fact that they can have thousands of applications for particular positions, but they're using systems that could discriminate against whole groups of people. So how do they balance that? And how do they balance that with certain DEI commitments that they're likely to have made as well? And given, you can't guarantee that these systems won't discriminate against whole groups, particularly if you haven't done that audit, maybe employers need to decide not to use them.
Yeah, very interesting. That was something I was going to ask you because, so many organizations, their core value is inclusion, diversity and inclusion, and it's all over their position descriptions, it's on their website, but yet they're potentially using these systems which are unfairly discriminating against lots of
Mm.
different groups.
Yeah, and look, I don't, what definitely came out of my research was that these systems aren't how they operate is not well understood. There was a whole group of people who I interviewed who believed that these systems actually were fairer because they're kind of objective and scientific, etc. They'd been assured by vendors that they were non-discriminatory. So, I think that we need greater levels of AI literacy. We need greater understanding of these systems. The problem is that vendors are very conflicted. Like, they've got all the knowledge about how these systems work, but they're also selling a product. So when when an employer goes to that vendor and says, is this system going to discriminate against someone who's got an accent? The vendor is likely to say, no, we've checked for that and it's fine. That's why you really need these independent audits of the system, because I don't think you can get a really honest answer out of someone who's trying to sell you a product.
Is there any advice that you would have based on your research, anything that job seekers can do to try and avoid being discriminated against in this process?
Well, I think, there is a legal obligation on employers to make adjustments for people with disability. So I don't think that's well enough understood by employers, and definitely not by job seekers. I mean, there's a whole lot of reasons why a job seeker mightn't want to disclose a disability, particularly when they're applying for a job. But if they were comfortable doing that, employers are legally obliged to provide an adjustment, so they can request, a human review of their application. They can request not to be assessed by AI. And I think anyone who isn't comfortable with an AI assessment should do that, should take that step and ask employers if they can have an alternative assessment process. When I spoke to employers, a number of them were open to that, and they said they had allowed that for people who weren't comfortable. Then, be prepared, do your research as much as you can, practice how to answer questions within time limits, those kind of things. But the reality is, for job seekers, some job seekers, none of that's going to matter if the system is kind of rigged against them. Like, there's no amount of preparation that's going to get you through. And I think that is the problem that we need to confront with these systems. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, that a lot of what we talk about with our clients is trying to find direct ways of applying rather than relying on job boards and having to go through these systems, and identifying companies, using their network. That's why it's so important for people returning from work after a career break, people perhaps more mature in the workforce, to perhaps look at alternative job search strategies so you're not relying on these systems.
Yeah, I think that is so sensible. Absolutely. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because what you're really saying is rely on that human-to-human interaction. Yeah.
Exactly. What are you working on now, Natalie?
So now the next stage of my research is to actually focus on job seekers and really try and understand their experiences of using these systems. I want to understand if it is common for people to feel like they've been discriminated against by these systems. I'm also looking at how people feel about the privacy implications of using these systems. And a bit more positively, I want to see if there's a way that these systems can actually be used to reduce discrimination in the labour market.
Very important piece of research. We will look forward to hearing more. And I will put some links to your research in the show notes. So if anyone is interested in having a further read into Natalie's research, they can access that through the show notes. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Really important and interesting work that you're doing. So congratulations on your paper being published earlier this year. And best of luck with your research later in the year as well.
Thanks so much, Leah. It's been a great conversation.
Thanks, Natalie. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Relaunch Your Career. If you did, please subscribe, share with your friends, leave a review, or connect with us on social media at Relaunch Me Career Consulting. If you have any questions about the episode or the work that we do, then contact us via the website relaunchme.com.au. Thanks for listening. Have a great day.